Wir starten aber mit einer kleinen Keynote von David Culver. Erstmal herzliches Willkommen und ein bisschen Applaus für David Culver. Er ist Repräsentant quasi unserer US-amerikanischen Partnerverbandes. Wir als Branchenverband arbeiten ja hier in Deutschland für die Cannabiswirtschaft und David arbeitet in den Vereinigten Staaten. Und er wird uns ein kleines Update geben. Wie sieht es in Amerika aus? Welche Strahlkraft hat es? Was gibt es an neuen Konzepten und wie arbeiten Sie mit der Politik zusammen? So, und now it's your... Und die Session ist natürlich in Englisch, zumindest was David anbelangt. Ich freue mich. Vielen Dank, David, dass du zu uns gekommen bist nach Berlin. Herzliches Willkommen. Warm welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to do all this in English. I hope that's okay, because I am giving an update on the United States. My name's David Culver. And thanks to the guys in the back that were clapping so loud. I'd like to meet you after. I am from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Great to be here with all of you in Berlin, and I'm here to talk about all things cannabis reform in the United States. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the organization that I'm with, which is the US-Cannabis Council. We are a Washington, D.C. based trade association, and we are focused on all things regulation in the states and on the federal level. And we are, of course, focused on everything related to cannabis reform, which is significant this year, finally, after many, many years of waiting. We represent over 80% of the cannabis industry in the United States, the state legal cannabis industry in the US, and we are representing almost 450,000 employees in the cannabis space as well. So the industry is continuing to grow significantly with our employee base. I'm going to talk about a number of things that are going on with the administration. But before I do that, I want to give you a sense of how I'm feeling about the US market, which is with an enormous amount of optimism and hope. We have had a very, very difficult time in the US over the last few years waiting on federal reform to happen. I think everybody may remember that in 2020 we had the Democratic Party sweep the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, so they controlled everything in Congress and the White House. We thought we were going to see significant reform, and we didn't see anything until October 2022. But what's happening right now, and the most important thing, is scheduling reform. This is going to change the dynamic dramatically in the United States, and I'm optimistic about it. My colleagues are optimistic about it. I think it sets us on the pathway to formally end the war on drugs in the United States, which has been raging for over 50 years, the most unsuccessful drug experiment period. This sets us on the glide path to formally end that, and I'm excited about that. So what's happening with scheduling reform? We are right in the middle of it right now, but let me back up and talk a little bit about the process. So October of 2022, President Biden made an announcement, unbeknownst to any of us, that he was beginning the scheduling reform process. And he tasked both the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice to collaborate with one another to make a recommendation on where cannabis belongs on schedule. Fast forward to August of 2023, and the Department of Health and Human Services made the recommendation for the first time in 50 years. Secretary Becerra said that cannabis does not belong on Schedule 1. In fact, it belongs on Schedule 3. He demonstrated through a 252-page document that cannabis has significant medical value and very low risk compared to other drugs that are on Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. This recommendation then went to the Department of Justice, and that's where it sits right now. The Department of Justice made also a recommendation earlier this year, following HHS's lead, that cannabis should be moved to Schedule 3. They began what's called a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, And that's where we are in the process right now. So we're right in the middle of the public comment period. We've got one more month to go. We have submitted a comment, as have over 15,000 additional folks. And I checked on Monday, and there were about 97% was the latest number that the media has been using. 97% of the comments that have gone in have been in support of Schedule 3. So this is a big deal. Now, there's a number of things that need to happen during that public comment period that could happen, right, in addition to the public comments. One is that you could potentially see an administrative law judge review, and this could delay the process. But my understanding as of earlier this week is that that's actually not going to happen. They're going to finish the public comment period, and they're going to get this final rule out before the election. So the election is early November in the US this year. I think we'll see final rule, and then we'll see a legal review period for 30 days afterwards. But once we get that final rule, that's going to be the certainty that the US market has been looking for a long, long time as it relates to cannabis moving down schedule. So what does this mean? Three things in my mind that are the most important. Number one, this is going to ease the research restrictions that we've got on cannabis right now in the US, and that's significant. We've had a great deal of difficulty researching this plant for decades, and this is going to ease those dramatically, and it's going to make it even easier to make the case that cannabis does not belong on schedule, because I don't believe it does. The second thing is, on the commercial side, it's going to remove a very significant tax burden, which is Section 280E. This is a provision in the tax code that basically sets the effective tax rate for individual cannabis companies at 75 to 80%. So 75 to 80% effective tax rate. It's impossible to do business with that type of rate. This move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, when it happens, is going to remove that tax burden altogether, and it's going to allow these companies to operate with a 20 to 21% effective tax rate. So commercially, this is the game changer that the industry's been hoping for. It's not going to disrupt existing state markets in any way, shape, or form, medical or adult use, but it will be very helpful with that removal of that tax burden. The third thing that it's going to do, and this is more me speaking as a political person, I talk to politicians all day, every day about cannabis. A lot of them, especially on the conservative side, are not comfortable with cannabis reform issues because it is sitting next to heroin and other dangerous drugs on Schedule 1. But when we move it down to Schedule 3, it's going to be sitting next to much, much less dangerous drugs, in fact, drugs that aren't dangerous, period, and they're going to be a lot more comfortable working on reform issues. So I think we're going to see a lot more reform efforts at the federal level and the opening of new medical and adult use markets in the US once this happens. It's just going to make it a lot easier. I also want to mention too, while I'm here, we've been working really hard with this administration, in addition to scheduling reform, on the reissuance of a Cole memorandum. So folks may remember 10 years ago, the Department of Justice made it very clear that they were not going to prioritize cannabis enforcement. It's time to reissue that memorandum, and it's time to make it more comprehensive. And what I mean by that is providing additional safe harbor for those that want to service the cannabis space, so particularly those in the financial services sector. I'd like to see access to banking. I'd like to see access to capital. I'd like to see uplisting. These are all things we're talking about with the administration. The second is providing safe harbor for agencies that have federal programs that they are currently unable to provide to cannabis users in legal states. For instance, federal housing policy. So if you're a cannabis user in a legal state, we want you to be able to have access to federal housing policy. We also don't want you to be kicked out of the United States because you are a cannabis user in a legal state. So I would like our immigration policy to also have the same safe harbor. So we're working on this with this administration. I think that we will see some sort of guidance later this year. We're also going to see guidance as it relates to 280E, because there's the possibility that you can not only take that 280E tax relief immediately, but you may be able to look back 3 years. And if that's the case, then companies are looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in savings that they can put immediately towards their bottom line. Okay, Capitol Hill. We have a very dysfunctional government right now. We are divided. We have very thin margins. We have a really tough time getting anything done in the United States, and cannabis is no exception. However, we continue to plug away primarily on the Safe Banking Act and also access for veterans. Those are the two main themes that we're working on. The Safe Banking Act just simply provides safe harbor for banks to service state legal markets. We have constant robbery and death associated with the cash business that we operate in the US. It's time to take the cash out of the system, and the Safe Banking Act would do that. So we are looking at an end-of-year play. It's called the lame duck period. It's the after the election period. That's when we think we're going to be able to move the Safe Banking Act. And this is important for providing safe harbor for businesses, obviously, but it's also important because it socializes the idea that we can pass cannabis reform in Washington in a bipartisan way with a divided government. So I'm excited about that, and I feel pretty optimistic about that towards the end of the year. The last thing I want to mention to all of you is that I've got many colleagues that I worked with that are here at this conference when I was at the Canopy Growth Corporation, and we had a global operation at the time, 5 regions actually around the world. And one of the things that we talked about ad nauseum was an international collaborative spirit and collaborative effort that we could potentially piece together. I was in the beverage alcohol space for 16 years, and we had a very well-organized, sophisticated group that we worked with to tackle anything on the international level that was a threat to the beverage alcohol industry. We need to do the same in cannabis. And not only am I thinking about promoting sound regulatory policy, but I'm also thinking about issues on the responsibility side. So impaired driving, youth access, advertising and marketing standards, and those are just to name a few. But I see us as a group, and I see this conference as an opportunity for us to start this collaboration. We're going to be talking more about this tomorrow afternoon on our panel, and we can get more in depth on it, but I think this is critically important. I am so excited to be here with all of you. I want to leave you all with a message of optimism about the United States. If you are thinking about the US market, come see me, or just come and have a look, because things are about to change. By September or October of this year, we are going to have a very different dynamic in the US, both from a commercial side and just the normalization of the business itself. And I also think this is going to drive the international market. So if folks are here in Germany that are regulators that are working on this issue, I strongly encourage you to come and see me also to learn more about the US. We would like to collaborate with you in this market as our market opens up even further. So with that, Dirk, thank you so much for having me. Great to be with you all. Great to be here, and please, I'd love to meet many of you while I'm here. Thank you so much.